My friends, there are among us those whose hearts have turned away from what is good, whose souls have been twisted by falsehood and pride. These individuals do not always appear wicked at first glance. Indeed, some may wear the most charming of smiles or speak with the most silver of tongues. Yet, if one watches carefully, the truth reveals itself. There is a certain kind of person for whom truth is not a guiding light but an inconvenience, a thing to be twisted, ignored, or buried. These individuals do not merely misunderstand the truth, they despise it. They will go to great lengths to silence it when it threatens their interests, and they will eagerly replace it with whatever falsehood best suits their purpose. For them, reality is not something to be acknowledged but something to be shaped, bent to their will, and forced to serve them. At first, this hatred of truth may not be obvious. A person may seem reasonable, intelligent, even charming, but watch carefully and the pattern emerges. When confronted with facts that contradict their desires, they do not pause to consider, to weigh, or to adjust their thinking. Instead, they react with hostility or dismissal. If the truth is too strong to be ignored, they will attack the source, discrediting the speaker rather than engaging with the idea itself. They are not interested in learning, only in winning. You may see this in small things at first. Perhaps they tell a story in which they are always the hero, always the victim, never the one at fault. If a detail does not serve their purpose, they leave it out or adjust it just slightly. The first time it seems harmless, the second time a pattern appears. And before long, you realize that for them, the truth is never quite what happened, but always what is most useful. Such people see truth as an enemy because it threatens their illusions. It demands something of them: humility, change, acknowledgement of wrongs, and these are things they will not give. To accept the truth would mean accepting limitations, admitting weaknesses, recognizing failures, but they cannot bear to do this. To them, reality must always conform to their will, never the other way around. It is easy to think of this as a mere flaw, a bad habit of bending the truth to one's advantage. But it is something more dangerous than that. The person who rejects truth as a principle does not simply lie on occasion. They build their entire life upon falsehood. They begin to believe their own deceptions. They no longer recognize the difference between what is real and what is convenient. And in time, they become prisoners of their own delusions. A person who despises truth is also dangerous to those around them. Such people demand loyalty, but it is not the loyalty of friendship or trust. It is the loyalty of blindness. They expect others to accept their falsehoods, to repeat them, to live within the world they have fabricated. And should anyone refuse, should anyone dare to speak the truth, they will be treated as an enemy. You will see this in how they handle disagreement. A person who values truth will listen, will consider, will, even if reluctantly, accept what is real. But the one who despises truth reacts with fury. They do not argue to understand, they argue to overpower. They do not seek clarity, they seek control. And should reason fail them, they turn to mockery, to intimidation, to whatever means will silence the inconvenient voice that speaks against them. Such people may rise to great heights, they may gather followers, admirers, even entire crowds who believe in their vision, but the foundation of their power is sand. Sooner or later, truth reasserts itself. It may take time, it may take years, but falsehood cannot hold forever. The world they have built will collapse, and they will be left with nothing, for they have spent their lives fighting against reality itself. The tragedy is not only in their downfall, but in the harm they cause along the way. How many people have been led astray by their lies? How many friendships, families, and communities have been broken because one person chose deception over honesty? How much suffering has been caused simply because someone refused to accept what was true? And yet, the greatest danger is not simply in recognizing such people in the world around us. The greatest danger is in failing to recognize the temptation within ourselves. For who has not, at some point, ignored a truth that was too difficult to face? Who has not preferred a comfortable lie to an uncomfortable reality? The difference between a flawed person and a truly corrupt one is whether they fight against this impulse or embrace it. Let us not be like those who despise the truth. Let us not fall into the habit of reshaping reality to suit our desires. Let us instead have the courage to face what is real, no matter how painful, no matter how humbling. For truth is not our enemy, it is our only hope. There is something deeply unsettling about a person who finds joy in the suffering of others. It is not the ordinary selfishness that exists in all human hearts, nor the occasional moment of schadenfreude that even the best of us may feel when someone who has wronged us meets justice. No, this is something colder, something more deliberate. It is not the mere absence of kindness, but the presence of cruelty, the enjoyment of pain, the delight in destruction. At first, such people may not seem cruel. They may hide it behind humor, calling their mockery harmless fun. They may justify it with righteousness, claiming that those who suffer deserve it. But in time, the pattern becomes clear. They are always watching, waiting for someone to stumble, for someone to fail, for someone to hurt. And when it happens, they do not grieve, they gloat. They do not reach out a hand to help, they stand back and smile. This delight in misery reveals itself in many ways. It may be in the small, cutting remark made when someone is already struggling. It may be in the way they speak about others, never with admiration or respect, but always with contempt. It may be in the way they stir conflict, whispering words designed to wound, fueling division rather than peace. Sometimes their cruelty is passive. They see someone drowning and do nothing. They hear a cry for help and remain silent. But often it is active. They push people toward failure, encourage their downfall, set traps they pretend not to have placed. If someone is weak, they make them weaker. If someone is lost, they lead them further astray. And if confronted, they do not repent. They smirk, amused that anyone should be so naive as to expect kindness from them. Why do such people exist? Why would anyone take pleasure in suffering? The answer perhaps lies in their own emptiness. A person who delights in cruelty is often a person who has nothing else. They have no true joy, no real peace, no meaningful love. And so in the absence of these things, they take what they can: power over others, the bitter pleasure of superiority, the twisted satisfaction of knowing they have hurt someone and that no one can stop them. There is a reason why the most corrupt souls often seek out the weak. It is not because they are strong themselves. It is because they are afraid. They know that deep down they are hollow. They know that if ever they were truly known, they would be found wanting, and so they compensate. They destroy, they mock, they break what they cannot build, and yet these people often fool themselves. They believe they are strong, that their coldness is wisdom, that their cruelty is justice. They think themselves above kindness, above sentiment, above weakness, but in truth, they are the weakest of all. For what is strength if not the ability to build rather than destroy? What is wisdom if not the understanding that mercy is greater than mockery? And what is justice if not the defense of the innocent rather than the exploitation of them? To find joy in suffering is not a sign of power. It is a sign of decay. It is the mark of a soul that has turned against what is good and has chosen instead to embrace the darkness. And the tragedy of such people is not only the harm they cause to others, but the fate they seal for themselves. For no one who delights in suffering can ever find true happiness. No one who seeks only to tear down can ever build anything of worth. No one who lives for cruelty can ever know what it means to be truly alive. There may come a day when such a person finds themselves alone, when their laughter at another's pain fades into silence, when they look around and realize that the destruction they have sown has left them with nothing. In that moment, perhaps, they will understand. But whether they will change is another matter. Some will, broken by the weight of their own emptiness. Others will not, choosing instead to harden their hearts further, to double down on the cruelty that has become their only comfort. For those who encounter such people, the temptation is to respond in kind. to mock the mocker, to scorn the scorner, to take pleasure in their suffering as they have in ours. But to do so is to become like them. The only way to truly defeat such darkness is to refuse to join it. The only way to break the cycle is to be the kind of person who, instead of delighting in misery, seeks to heal it. The world has no shortage of those who take joy in the pain of others. But if ever we wish to see something better, we must choose another way. We must refuse to laugh at cruelty, refuse to stand by when we could stand up, refuse to let the delight in suffering take root in our own hearts. For in the end, it is not the mockers who are strong. It is those who, even in the face of cruelty, choose compassion instead. There are few things as dangerous as a person who refuses to acknowledge their own faults. It is not that they make mistakes, for mistakes are common to all, but that they will never admit to them. No matter how clear their wrongdoing, no matter how undeniable the evidence, they will find a way to escape responsibility. They will twist the story, shift the blame, or reframe their actions in such a way that they appear blameless. If they are caught in a lie, they will insist they were misunderstood. If they are confronted with harm they have caused, they will claim it was someone else's fault. If there is no way to deny what they have done, they will justify it, explaining why they had no choice, why they were forced into it, why they are in fact the real victim. To argue with such a person is an exhausting endeavor. No matter how carefully one presents the truth, they will refuse to engage with it honestly. They may deflect, bringing up unrelated faults in others to distract from their own. They may attack, turning the conversation against the accuser and making them feel guilty for even daring to challenge them. They may manipulate, offering half apologies that sound like regret but contain no real admission of guilt. This kind of person is often very skilled at appearing reasonable. They may present themselves as thoughtful, fair-minded, even humble, but beneath the surface there is an iron resistance to self-examination. They have built their identity upon the belief that they are right, and to admit otherwise would be unthinkable. And so rather than accept their faults and seek to correct them, they devote themselves to the task of defending their own perfection. This refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing is not merely a personal failing, it is a moral corruption. A person who cannot admit fault is a person who cannot grow. They are trapped in a cycle of self-justification, forever finding ways to prove to themselves that they are never to blame. Over time, this leads to an erosion of conscience. When someone convinces themselves often enough that they have done no wrong, they lose the ability to distinguish right from wrong at all. At first, this may seem like mere arrogance, but arrogance alone is not the root of the problem. At the heart of it lies something more dangerous: fear. The fear of being seen as weak, the fear of losing control, the fear that if they were to admit fault even once, everything they have built would come crashing down. And so they double down again and again, refusing to yield even when yielding would bring healing, refusing to confess even when confession would bring peace. The consequences of this refusal are far-reaching. Such a person cannot maintain healthy relationships, for relationships require the ability to apologize, to make amends, to acknowledge harm done. They will leave behind them a trail of broken friendships, fractured families, and wounded hearts, never understanding why the same conflicts seem to follow them wherever they go. They will also over time find themselves more and more alone. At first, there will be those who excuse their behavior, who tolerate their unwillingness to admit fault, who accept their justifications, but eventually, even the most patient of friends will grow weary, for there is nothing more disheartening than trying to reason with someone who will not hear. Nothing more painful than watching someone destroy themselves through their own unwillingness to face the truth. Worse still, such people become dangerous in positions of power. A leader who cannot admit fault will never correct their course, no matter how disastrous their decisions may be. A teacher who cannot admit error will mislead those who trust them. A parent who cannot apologize will teach their children not humility but pride, not wisdom but stubbornness. In all places, at all levels, the inability to acknowledge fault breeds destruction. Yet the greatest tragedy of all is what such a person does to themselves. For in their refusal to acknowledge their flaws, they ensure that they will never overcome them. They deny themselves the possibility of growth, the possibility of redemption, the possibility of true strength. A person who admits their faults can change, can improve, can become something greater than they were. But a person who refuses to see their faults is doomed to repeat them over and over until they have lost everything. And so if one encounters such a person, the question arises, what can be done? The answer is often difficult, for those who refuse to admit fault rarely change through argument or persuasion. They must come to the realization themselves, and many never do. Some will only see the truth when their life has fallen apart, when the damage they have done is too great to ignore. Others, even then, will insist that they were only victims of circumstance, that the world has wronged them, that they were never at fault. But for those who still have the ability to hear, the path is simple, though not easy. It requires courage to look in the mirror and see one's own flaws. It requires humility to say the words, "I was wrong." It requires wisdom to understand that admitting fault is not weakness but strength, that it does not diminish a person but refines them. And those who learn this lesson, who reject the pride that blinds and embrace the truth that heals, are the ones who will grow into something better. For in the end, the difference between a person who is merely flawed and a person who is truly lost is not in whether they make mistakes, but in whether they are willing to see them. A person who has no true friends may not appear lonely at first glance. They may surround themselves with people, speak confidently in a crowd, and even have many who admire them. They may seem well-liked, influential, and even powerful, but look closer and you will see the difference between admiration and friendship, between allies and companions, between those who are useful to them and those who truly know them. The person who has no real friends is not necessarily alone, but they are always isolated. Such people often do not understand the value of true friendship. To them, relationships are not built on trust, loyalty, or shared affection, but on utility. They see people not as ends in themselves, but as means to an end. They cultivate connections not out of love, but out of strategy, choosing their company based on what others can provide. Some seek status, others influence, others financial gain. Whatever the goal, the principle remains the same. People are not friends, they are tools. This way of thinking makes genuine connection impossible. True friendship requires vulnerability, honesty, and the willingness to give without expecting anything in return. But a person who sees others only in terms of their usefulness cannot afford to be vulnerable. They cannot afford to be truly known, because if others saw them as they are, calculating, self-serving, detached, they might withdraw. And so they wear a mask, carefully crafting an image that keeps people at a safe distance while still drawing them close enough to be used. One of the most telling signs of such a person is that their relationships are shallow. They may have many acquaintances, but few, if any, know them deeply. They may be the center of attention in social settings, but their interactions lack warmth, sincerity, and depth. They may be surrounded by people who praise them, but when hardship comes, they find themselves strangely alone. Those who once stood by them drift away, not out of cruelty, but because they were never truly valued as friends, only as instruments. Another sign is that their relationships are short-lived. At first, people may be drawn to their charisma, their charm, or their apparent success, but over time, the truth becomes clear. Those who enter their circle expecting friendship eventually realize that their presence is conditional. The moment they stop being useful, they are discarded, and as this pattern repeats, as one person after another leaves, the person who has no true friends finds themselves constantly replacing old acquaintances with new ones, never forming bonds that last, Such people are also incapable of true loyalty. They may pretend at devotion, may speak of trust and commitment, but their actions reveal otherwise. A true friend defends in times of need, stands by in hardship, and values the person over the benefit they bring. But the one who has no true friends will abandon, betray, or undermine the very people they once claimed to care for if it serves their interests. To them, loyalty is not a principle, it is a tactic given only as long as it is beneficial. Yet, despite all their calculated efforts, they often find themselves deeply dissatisfied. They may convince themselves that they are independent, that they do not need friendship, that they are above the sentimentality of human attachment. But no one is immune to the need for connection. Even those who reject friendship still feel its absence, though they may not recognize it for what it is. They may chase power, wealth, or influence, believing that these things will fill the void, but in the end, they find that none of these can replace the warmth of genuine companionship. The tragedy of such a life is that it is self-perpetuating. Those who use others soon find that they are in turn surrounded only by those who use them. Having rejected true friendship, they attract only those who are just as transactional as they are. And so when they fall, as all must eventually, there is no one left to catch them. Those who once flattered them disappear, those who once followed them turn away, and they are left with the emptiness they themselves created. But the saddest part is that this fate is avoidable. No one is beyond the reach of real friendship, but it requires something that such people often struggle to give: sincerity. True friendship cannot be built on manipulation or convenience. It requires honesty, selflessness, and the willingness to care for another without expectation of reward. It requires seeing people not as assets, but as fellow souls, worthy of love for who they are, not for what they offer. There is still hope for those who find themselves alone, not by accident, but by their own making. But the path back is not easy. It requires undoing years of habit, replacing calculation with authenticity, and learning to value people not for their usefulness, but for their presence. It requires learning to be a friend, not just to have them. And for those willing to take that path, the reward is not just companionship, but something far greater: the realization that in valuing others, one finds their own worth. A person who craves power above all else will never be satisfied. Power by its nature is something that must be maintained, defended, and, if possible, expanded. It is never enough to simply have authority or influence. One must have more, always more. And because power is their highest goal, they will do whatever is necessary to obtain and keep it, no matter the cost to others. At first, they may not seem dangerous. They may present themselves as leaders, as visionaries, as people with noble ambitions. They may speak of justice, of order, of doing what is best for others. But if you watch their actions rather than their words, you will see the truth. Every decision they make, every move they take, is not about justice or service, but about consolidating their position. They do not seek power to do good, they do good to gain power. If kindness will elevate them, they will be kind. If cruelty will serve them better, they will be cruel. There is no principle guiding them, only the pursuit of control. Such people are often masters of manipulation. They understand how to present themselves in ways that make others trust them. They know when to flatter, when to inspire, when to instill fear. They can make people believe they are working for a greater cause, when in reality they care for nothing but their own advancement. And once they have gained control over others, they do not easily let it go. A person consumed by the hunger for power does not tolerate dissent. Those who agree with them will be rewarded. Those who challenge them will be silenced. They surround themselves with those who will tell them what they want to hear, driving out anyone who dares to offer an honest opinion. Over time, they become trapped in their own illusion, believing their authority to be absolute, their decisions unquestionable, and yet for all their efforts to appear strong, they are never at peace. Power, when it is the only thing a person values, turns into a burden. A leader who seeks power only for its own sake can never rest, for there is always someone who may challenge them, always a threat, real or imagined, that must be eliminated. They become paranoid, suspicious of those closest to them, unable to trust even those who have sworn loyalty. In their eyes, everyone is a rival, everyone a potential enemy, and so they lash out at shadows, destroying friendships, breaking alliances, ensuring that they are surrounded only by those too afraid to speak the truth. But the greatest irony is this: the more power they gain, the more they fear losing it. They become prisoners of the very thing they sought. They cannot step away, cannot relax, cannot enjoy the fruits of their success. Their days are spent securing their dominance, their nights haunted by the possibility of losing it. And in time, the weight of their ambition becomes unbearable. Even those who appear to succeed, who rise to the highest levels of influence, find that it is never enough. If they have wealth, they will want more. If they have control over a small group, they will seek control over a larger one. And if they achieve everything they once dreamed of, they will find that it does not satisfy them. For power alone cannot bring happiness, it cannot bring love or joy or peace. It can command obedience, but it cannot create trust. It can inspire fear, but it cannot inspire loyalty. It can silence enemies, but it cannot silence the emptiness within. In the end, the person who values power above all else is doomed to be alone. Those who once followed them will leave when they are no longer useful. Those who once feared them will rejoice when they fall, and when their power is gone, as it inevitably will be, they will have nothing left. No real friends, no lasting legacy, no peace. Only the bitter realization that everything they worked for was nothing more than an illusion, and that, in the pursuit of control, they lost the one thing they never truly had: true strength. For true strength is not found in the ability to dominate, but in the ability to serve. The greatest leaders are not those who seek power for themselves, but those who use what power they have for the good of others. They do not cling to control out of fear. They lead with wisdom, knowing that leadership is not about self-preservation, but about responsibility. They are not obsessed with their own importance, but with the well-being of those they lead. And because of this, they do not fear losing power, for they were never dependent on it in the first place. A person who craves power above all else will never be satisfied, never be secure, never be loved. They will chase control their whole lives, only to find, at the end, that it has left them empty. But those who understand that power is not an end in itself, but a tool to be used wisely, will find something far greater than power: true purpose, true peace, and true strength. A person who never feels guilt may seem at first to be free. They move through life untouched by regret, untroubled by remorse, never pausing to reflect on the harm they have caused. They appear confident, unshaken, even strong. But look closer, and you will see that this absence of guilt is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of something missing, something essential to being truly human. For guilt, painful as it may be, is what allows us to recognize our wrongs and make them right. Without it, there can be no growth, no redemption, no real understanding of morality at all. At the heart of a person who never feels guilt is a refusal to acknowledge the weight of their actions. They see themselves as justified in all they do, no matter how much harm they cause. If they are cruel, it is because cruelty was necessary. If they lie, it is because the truth was inconvenient. If they betray, it is because they had no other choice. And if someone suffers because of them, they find a way to believe that it was not their fault. Such a person is not merely selfish, they are untouchable by conscience. When confronted with the harm they have caused, they do not reflect or apologize. They dismiss, they justify, they deflect. If they cannot deny what they have done, they will minimize it, insisting that it was not as bad as others claim. If their wrongdoing is undeniable, they will find a way to make themselves the victim, claiming that they were forced into their actions, that they had no other option, that they are the ones who have been wronged. This lack of guilt allows them to act without hesitation, without the burdens that trouble ordinary people. They can manipulate, deceive, and hurt without a second thought because there is no inner voice urging them to stop, no lingering shame to slow them down. And because they do not feel guilt, they do not change. A person who feels guilt can learn, can grow, can become better. But a person who never feels guilt remains the same, repeating their mistakes over and over, never recognizing the need to do otherwise. But while they may seem unaffected by their actions, there is a cost. A person without guilt cannot form deep, meaningful relationships. They may have allies, acquaintances, admirers, but true friendship requires empathy, and empathy requires the ability to recognize when one has done wrong. Without that, their relationships remain shallow, built not on trust but on convenience. People may stay with them for a time, but eventually the pattern becomes clear. This is someone who does not take responsibility, who does not acknowledge harm, who does not care about the feelings of others. And when that realization comes, people leave. This is why those who never feel guilt often end up alone. They drive people away not through anger or cruelty alone, but through an utter unwillingness to ever say, "I was wrong." They may blame others for their loneliness, may convince themselves that they were surrounded by weak or disloyal people, but the truth remains, their refusal to feel guilt, to acknowledge fault, has left them isolated. Yet perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is that in rejecting guilt, they reject growth. Guilt, painful as it is, has a purpose. It is what prompts us to seek forgiveness, to repair what we have broken, to become better than we were before. A person who cannot feel guilt is a person who cannot truly change. They may adjust their tactics, learn new ways to manipulate or avoid blame, but at their core, they remain the same. And in doing so, they deny themselves the possibility of true redemption. For all their confidence, for all their ability to move through life unburdened, there is an emptiness at the center of such a person. They may never acknowledge it, may never admit that something is missing, but deep down, they know. They know that the people around them do not truly trust them. They know that their relationships are fragile. And though they will never say it out loud, they know that something within them is broken. But the saddest truth of all is that this is a prison of their own making. The ability to feel guilt is not a curse, it is a gift. It is what allows us to mend what we have broken, to seek forgiveness, to find our way back when we have lost our path. A person who never feels guilt may believe they are free, but in reality they are trapped. Trapped in a life where they will always push people away, always repeat the same mistakes, always remain the person they are now, never becoming something better. Yet even for them, change is possible. It is difficult, perhaps the hardest thing they will ever do, but it is not beyond reach. It begins with a single step, the willingness to acknowledge, even for a moment, that they are not perfect, that they have caused harm, that they are not above the moral weight that binds all people together. And if they take that step, if they allow themselves to feel the thing they have spent so long avoiding, then they may find something they never expected. Not weakness, not shame, but freedom. The freedom to grow, to heal, and at last to become truly human.